Today our topic is fractions and decimals, so our essential question is how can I compare and order various forms of rational numbers? First off, some vocabulary key terms. Terminating decimal, when the division ends with a remainder of 0. Terminating decimal. We also call this an ending decimal. It means it just stops, like this example, 2.45. Doesn't keep going on and on. Doesn't have that dot, dot, dot at the end. It just stops. It's done. And then we have repeating decimal. The same block of digits repeats infinitely many times. So in the example, we have 2.3, and all the 3's are repeating. So that dot, dot, dot would mean it's 2.3 repeating. Remember that line over the top. It can also be more than one set of numbers. So if we had 4.987 and then 987 was repeating, that would just be 4.987, 987, 987 forever and ever and ever. So two different ways of writing repeating decimals. Changing fractions to decimals. So we want to be able to convert between forms. So to change a fraction to a decimal, we divide the numerator by the denominator. Okay, divide the numerator by the denominator. Remember, numerator is the top number. Denominator is the bottom number. Okay, so for this 1 over 4, we would do 1 divided by 4. And we can use our calculator for this. We don't have to do long division. So if we pull up our calculator, we do 1 divided by 4. And we get 0.25. Now the thing your calculator won't do is it will not put a 0 in front of the decimal point. You saw on the calculator was 0.25. We want to put a 0 in front of the decimal point because then it makes sure that we remember that there's actually a decimal point there. Because if we don't have the decimal point, sometimes it can get lost. It can look like a scratch pencil mark. It can look not like a decimal point. So we do want to put that 0 there in front, even though the calculator doesn't. Now 1 7/8 we call a mixed number, so that it has a whole number piece and a fraction piece. So this means we're going to keep the 1, put a decimal point after it, and then we're going to do 7 divided by 8. We're just going to take the fraction piece, and that's going to be our decimal part. So if we go back to our calculator, and we do 7 divided by 8, we get 0.875. Now instead of having a 0 in front this time, we do have that 1 there because of the whole number 1, and then we put the 875 after the 1. (15/11). We call this an improper fraction because the numerator is bigger than the denominator. But it still works just the same. We do 15 divided by 11. Go to our calculator, type that in, and we get 1.363636. So you see that pattern there? That means it's repeating the 36 every time. We got 36, 36, 36. And I know the 4 is there at the end, and that's okay. That's just the calculator rounding it at the end, but we do want to demonstrate that repeating with drawing the line over it. So since it is repeating the 36, we do need to put a line over the 36. And then lastly, 3 divided by 5. We go to our calculator and we type in 3 divided by 5. That's our fraction, and we get 0.6. Then remember, our calculator doesn't do it, but we do need to put that 0 in front of the decimal point, 0.6. All right, and then the last piece, we want to be able to order decimals and fractions from least to greatest. So the reason we talk about changing fractions to decimals is that's the first step in ordering. When you have multiple forms, the easiest way is to change all fractions to decimals. So we want to change anything that's not a decimal into a decimal, and then put an order from least to greatest. You can use the number line if you feel like it'll help you. So here's numbers that you can put on your number line. if you think the number line will help you. Sometimes it can. Otherwise, we can just use our logic. And one thing is decimals is money. That's how we express money. So if you think about money, forms of money, that can be very helpful in ordering. So we have 0.2. So 0.2 is 20 cents. It's 2 dimes. That's already a decimal. We have 4/5. So we do need to change 4/5 into a decimal. 4/5 equals, so we need to do 4 divided by 5. So we'll go back to our calculator. And we'll do 4 divided by 5. And we get 0.8. So that's 0.8. So 0.8 would be 80 cents. All right, so we have 20 cents, we have 80 cents, 7/10 right here. We need to change that into a decimal. 7 divided by 10 is going to give us 0.7, which is 70 cents. And here, 0.5 is already a decimal. 0.5 is 50 cents. So if we think about money, the least amount of money we have is 20 cents. So that's going to be our smallest number, 0.2. The next biggest amount of money is 50 cents. So then we put comma, 0.5. Then the next biggest amount would be 70 cents. Now we don't want to put the decimal form in our list. We need to put the original form. So since the original form was 7/10, we're going to put 7/10. And then the last amount is 80 cents. So 80 cents was originally 4/5. So that would be our fractions and decimals in order from least to greatest, the smallest amount to the biggest amount. Okay, now if we look at the next page, we do have some negatives. Now negatives, if we look at this number line, are always smaller than positives. So if you have negatives and positives, your negatives should always go first and then your positives if you're going from least to greatest. But these are all negatives. So that means we have to think backwards because that means we're in debt money. So -1/8, we can change that into a decimal by doing -1 divided by 8, and we get -1.25. Or -0.125, excuse me. We can put that 0 there. So if we just take those first 2 digits after the decimal place, that'd be about like 12 cents. So that means we're in debt 12 cents. Then if we look at -0.75, that's already a decimal. We need to change -1/4 into a fraction. If we do -1 divided by 4, we get -0.25. That means we're in debt 1/4, 25 cents. And then -0.375 is already a decimal. So we could take those first 2 digits. That means we're in debt 37 cents. So when we're working with negatives, we have to think backwards. Which debt is the most? And that would be this one right here, which means that's the least because we don't want to be in debt more money. So we have to put that one first. So that's why I said we have to think backwards. So then the next amount of debt up would be this decimal, -0.375, because that would be in debt 37 cents. And then the next amount of debt, the better amount of debt, would be -0.25, which remember that was originally -1/4. So we do need to go back to the original. And then the greatest number would be the best amount of debt. The smallest amount of debt, the debt we would rather be in, which would be -1/8, which was that in debt 12 cents. I'd rather owe somebody 12 cents than owe somebody 75 cents. So that is ordering from least to greatest.